It was supposed to be a simple bank robbery. 12 minutes, 6 gunmen, $1 million score. What they didn't expect was that the bank manager they'd taken hostage was former Special Forces, and he'd been studying their operation for weeks. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories where the hunter becomes the hunted and where patience becomes the deadliest weapon, consider subscribing. Your support helps bring more untold stories of strategic warfare to light. David Chen had been the branch manager of First National Bank for exactly 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days. He knew this precisely because he counted everything: customer traffic patterns, security vulnerabilities, employee routines, and most importantly, the behavioral patterns of the 6 men who had been surveilling his bank for the past 3 weeks. To his staff, David was the model of corporate efficiency, arriving at 7:30 a.m. sharp, reviewing overnight transactions with methodical precision, and maintaining the kind of professional demeanor that made employees feel secure and customers feel valued. His office was organized with military precision, though no one made that connection. Why would they? David Chen was just a banker. What they didn't know was that David Chen had died 12 years ago in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The man sitting behind the mahogany desk was Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, 75th Ranger Regiment, who had volunteered for the military's most dangerous deep cover program after his official death had been staged to protect him from Taliban reprisals. The Federal Witness Protection Program had given him a new identity, a college degree in finance that existed on paper but never in reality, and a job that let him disappear into suburban normalcy. For 12 years, it had worked perfectly. He was invisible, unremarkable, exactly what the program intended, until 3 weeks ago when he noticed the man in the blue sedan who spent too much time studying the bank's exterior cameras. David's training had never left him. While his employees saw him reviewing loan applications, he was actually conducting reconnaissance on the reconnaissance team watching his bank. Professional surveillance, not amateur criminals. These men moved with military precision, rotated positions according to a schedule, and most tellingly, they knew things about the bank's security systems that weren't publicly available. This wasn't a random robbery. It was a targeted operation. For 3 weeks, David had been playing a deadly game of chess. During his lunch breaks, he would walk to nearby businesses using reflective surfaces to observe his watchers. They were good, better than most criminals, but not better than someone who had spent 7 years hunting insurgents in urban environments. 6 men, rotating in pairs, professional equipment, encrypted communications, and most concerning of all, they had inside information. Someone had given them the bank's security protocols, shift schedules, and customer traffic patterns. David began his own counter-surveillance, staying late to review security footage, cross-referencing employee schedules with the times the surveillance team was most active. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The leak was coming from inside the bank. Margaret Hoffman, the assistant manager who had worked there for 15 years, had been making deposits to an offshore account. Small amounts, untraceable, but consistent with payments for intelligence gathering. She had been feeding information to the surveillance team for months. David faced a choice that felt familiar from his military days: act on incomplete intelligence or wait for confirmation and risk civilian casualties. His staff didn't know they were working in a target zone. The customers who came in for routine transactions had no idea they were walking into what would soon become a battlefield. But David knew. And for the first time in 12 years, Master Sergeant Rodriguez began preparing for war. David's office became a command center, though no one could tell. His daily reports now included tactical assessments disguised as customer service observations. The coffee maker he installed was positioned to give him clear sightlines to all entrances. The plant he moved provided concealment for a clear shot to the main lobby. Most importantly, he began studying his employees as assets rather than colleagues. Who could be trusted in a crisis? Who would panic? Who had military or law enforcement backgrounds that could be activated under pressure? James Torres, the security guard, was former military police but had been out of service for 8 years. Physically capable but possibly rusty on tactical procedures. Lisa Park, the head teller, had grown up on a ranch and mentioned hunting with her father, comfortable with firearms, good under pressure based on how she handled difficult customers. Sandra Williams, the loan officer, was a former emergency room nurse, experience with trauma, steady hands, clear thinking under stress. And Margaret Hoffman, the traitor who would need to be neutralized before she could compromise the others. David began leaving work later, ostensibly to complete paperwork, but actually to memorize every inch of the bank after hours. He mapped sightlines, identified cover positions, and located potential weapons among the everyday objects that filled the office environment. The letter opener on Margaret's desk was solid steel, weighted like a throwing knife. The fire extinguisher near the vault could blind attackers and provide chemical concealment. The marble penholder on his own desk was heavy enough to crush a skull if applied with proper force. For 3 weeks, David Chen, the bank manager, continued his routine, while Master Sergeant Rodriguez prepared for an operation that would determine whether his 12 years of peaceful invisibility would end in victory or catastrophe. Tuesday, November 15th, began exactly like every other day for the past 4 years. David arrived at 7:30 a.m., reviewed overnight transactions, and prepared for the staff meeting at 8 a.m. But today, he also checked the small GPS tracker he had placed on the blue sedan. It was parked 3 blocks away, just outside normal surveillance range, but close enough for rapid deployment. During the staff meeting, David watched Margaret carefully. She was nervous, checking her phone repeatedly, clearly expecting something to happen. The other employees noticed nothing, discussing quarterly performance metrics and customer satisfaction surveys, while their assistant manager prepared to betray them. At 9:15 a.m., David received a text message from an unknown number. Package delivery at 10:30. Please ensure all staff are present for signature confirmation. The attack would come at 10:30, when the bank typically had maximum customer traffic and cash on hand from morning business deposits. David had exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes to prepare his defenses without alarming his staff or tipping off Margaret. He began with subtle repositioning. James, the security guard, was asked to check the parking lot cameras, a task that would put him in the best position to observe the approaching assault team. Lisa was assigned to count the cash drawers, positioning her behind the teller counter where she would have protection and access to the silent alarm system. Sandra was given loan files to review, work that required her to sit at the desk closest to his office and furthest from the main doors. If shooting started, she would be in the safest position. Margaret was the wild card. David couldn't isolate her without raising suspicions, but he couldn't leave her free to sabotage their defenses. At 10 a.m., he made his decision. "Margaret, I need you to help me with something in the vault," he said casually. "There's a discrepancy in the security box logs that requires both our signatures to resolve." She looked at her phone nervously. "Can it wait? I'm expecting an important call." "It'll just take a few minutes," David insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. As they walked toward the vault, David felt the familiar calm that had carried him through dozens of combat operations. The next 30 minutes would determine whether he remained David Chen forever, or whether Master Sergeant Rodriguez would have to emerge one final time. Inside the vault, Margaret's facade crumbled immediately. Perhaps it was the enclosed space, or perhaps David's demeanor had changed enough to trigger her survival instincts, but she knew her cover was blown. They said no one would get hurt, she said quickly, backing against the safety deposit boxes. It's just money. The insurance will cover everything. David closed the vault door behind them, ensuring their conversation couldn't be overheard. How long have you been feeding them information, Margaret? 6 months, she admitted, tears starting to form. My husband's medical bills. The treatments weren't covered by insurance. They offered me $50,000 just for employee schedules and security procedures. What's the plan? David's voice was calm, professional. Not the bank manager asking an employee, but a soldier interrogating a source. 6 men in and out in 12 minutes. They have the security codes. They know about the time lock systems. They even know which customers usually come in on Tuesday mornings. She paused, studying his face. You're not really just a bank manager, are you? David considered his options. Margaret knew too much to be left free, but killing her would create complications he wasn't prepared to handle. Instead, he made a tactical decision. Margaret, in about 10 minutes, armed men are going to enter this bank. They're going to threaten and possibly kill everyone you've worked with for 15 years. You have one chance to minimize the damage you've caused. What do you want me to do? Exactly what they told you to do, with one modification. When they ask for the vault access codes, you're going to give them codes that trigger the silent alarm and lock down the building. Margaret's eyes widened. If I betray them, they'll kill me. If you don't betray them, I will, David replied with matter-of-fact certainty. The difference is, if you help me, you might survive this. He handed her a small device from his pocket, a panic button connected to a private security company, not the police. When the shooting starts, press this and get behind the safety deposit boxes. Don't come out until you hear me call your name. Margaret took the device with shaking hands. Who are you, really? Someone who's very good at stopping people like this, David replied. But only if you do exactly what I tell you. David emerged from the vault at 10:25 a.m. with 5 minutes to prepare. The bank had 11 customers conducting routine business, unaware they were about to become hostages in a military operation. He activated the intercom system and made an announcement that sounded routine, but carried tactical significance for anyone trained to recognize it. Attention, staff. We'll be conducting a brief security drill in 5 minutes. Please ensure all customer areas are clean and organized. To the customers, it sounded like standard corporate procedure. To James, Lisa, and Sandra, it was their only warning that something was about to happen. David returned to his office and opened his desk drawer, revealing items that definitely didn't belong to a bank manager. A ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors, a small canister of pepper spray disguised as a breath freshener, and most importantly, a secure communication device that would connect him to people who could provide backup if needed. But backup would take time, and time was the one resource David didn't have. The assault team was already moving into position. Through his window, he could see them now. 6 men in maintenance uniforms approaching the building from different directions. Professional spacing, coordinated timing, weapons concealed but accessible. This was no amateur robbery. It was a military-style operation targeting a specific objective. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the first gunman entered through the main doors. The transformation from peaceful bank to battlefield happened in seconds. The lead gunman, a tall man with military bearing, walked directly to the information desk and pulled out a compact submachine gun. His voice carried across the lobby with trained authority. Everyone on the ground now. This is a robbery, not a massacre, but that can change quickly if anyone decides to be a hero. The customers dropped immediately, conditioned by decades of media coverage to know the script. Lie down, stay quiet, let the professionals handle it. What they didn't realize was that there were two sets of professionals in the building, and only one set was announcing their presence. David watched from his office as the other 5 gunmen took positions with tactical precision. 2 blocked the exits, 1 controlled the teller area, 1 moved toward the vault, and 1 maintained overwatch of the customer area. Classic room-clearing protocol, executed flawlessly. Margaret stood behind the teller counter, visibly shaking but playing her part. When the vault specialist approached her, she recited the security codes exactly as David had instructed. Codes that would trigger every silent alarm in the building while appearing to grant access. The gunmen were so confident in their inside information that they didn't question why the vault door remained locked despite Margaret's codes. Instead, they assumed it was a technical malfunction and called for their electronics specialist. That gave David the opening he needed. David Chen ceased to exist at 10:33 a.m. The man who stood up from behind the desk was Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, and he moved with lethal purpose that had been dormant for 12 years. His first target was the Overwatch gunman, positioned near the customer area with clear sightlines to the entire lobby. David approached from behind, using the decorative pillars as concealment. The ceramic knife slipped between the man's ribs without sound, and he dropped silently to the floor. 1 down, 5 to go. The second target was more challenging. The gunman controlling the exit had clear sightlines to most of the bank, but he was also positioned near a blind spot created by the ATM alcove. David moved through the customer area, using the prone hostages as concealment. To them, he appeared to be another terrified civilian crawling toward safety. To the gunman, he was invisible until it was too late. The pepper spray, deployed at close range, blinded the exit guard long enough for David to apply a chokehold that rendered him unconscious in seconds. David claimed the man's weapon, a professional-grade carbine with full auto capability. 2 down, 4 to go. The gunman realized something was wrong when their Overwatch stopped responding to radio calls. The leader, still positioned at the information desk, began scanning the room methodically. "Someone's moving," he announced to his team. "Kevin, Marcus, respond." Silence. David had anticipated this moment. From his position near the ATM, he had the clear shots at 3 of the remaining 4 gunmen, but taking them would expose him to return fire. Instead, he used a technique from his urban warfare training: misdirection. He threw the unconscious guard's radio across the room, where it clattered near the loan officer's desk. All 4 remaining gunmen turned toward the sound, and David struck. 3 controlled bursts from the captured carbine dropped the teller area guard and 1 of the exit blockers. The leader and vault specialist dove for cover, returning fire that shattered windows and sent plaster flying from the walls. 4 down, 2 to go. But now the engagement had shifted. The remaining gunmen knew they were facing a professional opponent, and they began moving with the tactical awareness of soldiers under fire. The bank lobby became a battlefield that David knew intimately, and his opponents were seeing for the first time. Every piece of furniture, every architectural feature, every sightline had been memorized and planned for. The leader tried to flank David's position by moving through the customer service area, but David had anticipated this route. A fragmentation grenade, improvised from a fire extinguisher, and some electronic components from his office, filled the area with chemical fog and metal debris. The vault specialist, realizing the operation had failed, attempted to escape through the rear exit, but David had sealed that route at the beginning of the engagement, and the man found himself trapped in a corridor with no cover and no exits. The final exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Professional against professional, but one had home field advantage and months of preparation. When the shooting stopped, David Rodriguez was the only man left standing. At 10:47 a.m., exactly 17 minutes after the assault began, David Chen reappeared. He helped the terrified customers to their feet, checked on his employees, and called 911 to report an attempted robbery that had been fortunately interrupted by bank security. When the police arrived, they found 6 dead gunmen, no civilian casualties, and a bank manager who seemed remarkably calm for someone who had just survived a military-style assault. The official report credited James Torres, the security guard, with disrupting the robbery through quick thinking and tactical expertise. David had coached him on what to say, providing a cover story that would satisfy investigators without raising questions about how a bank manager had acquired military-grade combat skills. Margaret Hoffman was arrested when investigators discovered her offshore accounts and communications with the assault team. She never revealed that David had known about her betrayal in advance, accepting a plea bargain that kept her husband's medical situation confidential. The insurance company paid out claims for damaged property, but never questioned how their insured location had successfully repelled a professional military operation. Bank security was considered adequate, and no changes were recommended. 3 weeks after the incident, David received a phone call from a number he recognized but hadn't heard from in 12 years. "Sergeant Rodriguez," said the voice of his former commanding officer. "Impressive work in Denver. Very clean, very professional." "I'm David Chen now," David replied carefully. "I manage a bank." "We know who you are, David. The question is whether you want to stay David Chen or whether Master Sergeant Rodriguez is ready for a new mission." David looked around his office, the mahogany desk, the customer service awards, the photographs of bank employees at the company picnic. 12 years of carefully constructed normalcy. "What kind of mission?" he asked. "The kind that requires someone who can blend into civilian life for years, gain positions of trust and access, and activate when needed. The kind of mission that saves lives by preventing wars instead of fighting them." David thought about the 11 customers who had gone home safely to their families, about Lisa, James, and Sandra, who would never know how close they had come to dying, about Margaret, whose betrayal had been motivated by desperation rather than malice. "I'll need to train a replacement for the bank," David said finally. "Take your time. Good deep cover assets are worth the investment." David hung up the phone and looked out his window at the Denver skyline. David Chen would remain the bank manager for as long as needed, but Master Sergeant Rodriguez was no longer retired. He was just getting started. The new assistant manager at First National Bank was a young woman named Sarah Martinez, recently graduated from business school with impeccable credentials and a talent for financial analysis. Her employees found her professional, dedicated, and remarkably well-informed about security procedures. What they didn't know was that Sarah Martinez was also Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, and she was David's replacement in a network of deep cover operatives positioned throughout the American financial system. David Chen had been promoted to regional manager, a position that required extensive travel and gave him access to banks, investment firms, and financial institutions across the western United States. Officially, he was conducting efficiency reviews and implementing new security protocols. Unofficially, he was building the infrastructure for operations that wouldn't begin for years, positioning assets that wouldn't activate unless the country faced threats that conventional military forces couldn't address. The quiet bank manager who had once been declared dead in Afghanistan was very much alive, and very much still serving his country. The battlefield had simply moved from the mountains of Helmand Province to the marble lobbies of American capitalism. And he was exactly where he needed to be. Final question: From which city are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story of patience, preparation, and the warrior who never truly retires, subscribe to discover more tales of heroes who fight wars in the shadows so others can live in the light.